Welcome to Cultivated Live for Wednesday, April 17th. I'm Jay Rosenthal, co-founder of Cultivated Media and host of this show, Cultivated Live. And since we launched, Jeremy and our goal has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, and useful information for your day. We do that through our daily newsletter, Cultivated Daily. How to subscribe is below. We do that through this daily live stream, Cultivated Live, which you're obviously watching on LinkedIn and YouTube. We'd love for you to follow us on those two places. Smash the subscribe button. Get into our newsletter because it is great. Jeremy Berke, welcome.
Jay Rosenthal, thank you for having me.
I love having you. I have to have you. No, yeah. I'm just kidding. You're wearing the shirt. Anybody that wears a shirt is going to get on the show. No problem. Before we begin, Jeremy, I want to give a shout out to our friend, Brad Spirison at Grown In. Today, they have a full day Cannabis Innovation Summit at 1871 in Chicago. So good luck, Brad and Co. in Chicago. Jeremy, we always say this. We've been saying it for years. There's never a dull moment in cannabis, but it seems less dull than normal.
Yeah, I yesterday was a jam-packed newsletter, perhaps because it's April 17th and we've got, the famous annual holiday coming up on Saturday, but it's been a good week. There's stuff going on. I like to write when there's stuff going on rather than trying to pull from whatever. So
we even have to have a special sort of subset of deals and partnerships and launches in the newsletter yesterday, probably similar today. But I would like to focus on the other news, which I may be driven by 420, but also may be driven by both the legislative calendar, politics, and a whole array of other things. You ready to dive in?
Let's do it. I'm born ready. Yeah.
And I will let everybody know it's well written today because it's from Jeremy, but you noted that the cannabis industry has been less than patient, waiting for Congress to pass some version of the Secure and Fair Enforcement Regulation Act, safer banking, and let folks bank more normally, certainly. And by your count, I think it's been 7 times that it's come up for a vote. But yesterday or this week, Senate Banking Committee Chairman Sherrod Brown said that he's open to advancing this is hard to follow. Stablecoin legislation, which is a cryptocurrency pegged to a normal fiat currency like the US dollar, with safer banking. Okay, that's one thing. Pair them together, but also attach it to FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration spending bill. And frankly, the FAA has been getting a lot of attention because planes, they're not falling out of the sky, but certainly parts of planes are. So they're under scrutiny. We also have this, the Dales Report, based here in Toronto, had a conversation with Senator Rand Paul, who didn't think it was going to pass the Speaker, pass the House. There's a lot going on related to this. Like, is this just more of the same heated up because of 420? Or is this safer banking stablecoin FAA thing real or something we're just like to talk about?
I will note that I had to chat GPT what a stablecoin was yesterday as I was writing this. So, my knowledge about the crypto space is probably less than stellar, but I'll respond to what you say in 2 parts. I think number one, the sniping back and forth from Senator Rand Paul and others, put as much credence as you want into that, right? He's a US senator. He obviously knows a thing or two, but he's sort of guessing just like the rest of us. He's reading the tea leaves. These are probably conversations that he's had in passing, not very substantively. So it's important to report what they say, but I wouldn't put too much stake into what general representatives are saying left and right. And I certainly wouldn't trade on that information. Right. I think the second piece, right, is that the Safer Banking Act, it's a pretty narrow bill. It's a bill that seemingly no one likes, Democrats or Republicans, but it's a bill that can get passed. It's the most compromised of compromised cannabis legislation. Attaching it to cryptocurrency legislation and then packaging that with the must-pass Federal Aviation Administration bill is a vehicle that sure could work, right? But we have seen the Safer Banking Act packaged with defense spending bills, and it has failed. So look, I think this is a novel idea. The the Banking Committee Chairman, Sherrod Brown, bringing it up and saying he's open to this. That is a change because normally he's been sort of an opponent of advancing crypto reform. That's based on a little research I've done yesterday, so don't quote me on that. But Schumer wants it, right? He wants to help his own constituents here in New York, which are interested in crypto, interested in cannabis. This is Wall Street. And so look, I think the push and pull, this is something that could happen. Don't hold me to the odds, right? But, I think the other thing I'll say on that is that it does sometimes rub opponents to the legislation the wrong way when you attach controversial things like crypto and cannabis to must-pass bills like the FAA reauthorization bill. And so that could end up being a political problem, or it could be so must-pass that they overlook the things that they're ideologically opposed to. So, a lot of words to say. We'll see.
We are watching and observing sausage being made in DC as we speak. We just have a vested interest in this sausage being made, and so perhaps we're following it closer. I do love, and this is my personal pet peeve, I used to work on Capitol Hill. The angst people have with Washington that things move slow. It's almost as if they've never paid attention to anything that's ever happened in Washington. I mean, try getting gun reform legislation passed. Try getting, almost anything passed in DC doesn't take weeks and months, takes years and sometimes decades, unfortunately.
Yes. Now, I may be just a simple Canadian, but here's what I'll say. I mean, this is the way our institutions were designed in the US. They were designed to move slowly. It was designed to be very difficult to put in big change like legalizing cannabis, and we're seeing that in real time.
Yes. I pretend to be humble Canadian, but I am whatever the opposite of that is, American. So I see you there. And you did mention New York, and there was some New York news yesterday, and we've covered this a lot about New York Governor Kathy Hochul wanting to crack down. Let's just call them bodega cannabis sales. That seems easier to say.
Sure.
They've put together something called the Smokeout Act, which gives local and state authorities the power to padlock offenders for up to a year for selling illicit or without a license. The idea that they could take away the alcohol, tobacco, and lottery licenses for bodegas. Here's what she said specifically. This is about illegal sort of cannabis sales. They have plagued our neighborhoods, flagrantly violating our laws, selling to kids, evading taxes, and even offering products laced with unregulated chemicals. They needed to be shut down. She went on, they won't disappear overnight, but eventually New Yorkers will see the change they've been waiting for in their communities. This will clear the way for the Black, Latino, women, immigrant, veteran, and justice-involved business owners who run the legal shops, the people our cannabis laws are intended to empower. So she's been very vocal. This was, I think, in concert with the sort of their budget up there. There's a lot happening.
Yeah, there's a lot happening. So basically what happened is pieces of the Smokeout Act made it into New York's 2025 budget, right? And so the problem before was that local authorities, jurisdictions, whether it's, municipality or the state, they had the ability to close these stores. So they put a padlock on them, but the padlock would be open 3 hours later and the store would be open again. A lot of the business owners were hard to track down. There's layers of shell companies. And so they didn't really know who to fine. And the fines were not large enough for them to really be worth closing their business down. Now they have the ability to lock the store for a full year while due process takes place, which means, holding the sellers accountable, letting these things work their way through the courts. But the important point is the businesses won't be able to sell. Look, I think Hochul has been very vocal, excuse the rhyme there, about cracking down on illicit cannabis. And look, I think the illicit shops, while they are not probably the ultimate cause of New York's cannabis industry struggles, they are a proximate cause and a very public one. So now the state has the boogeyman they can go after. They're showing that they're going after them. And look, it will work. There will be less on the street over time. There will be more legal dispensaries open. But again, to your earlier point, Jay, these things are going to take a long time and probably a lot longer than we all want to stomach.
Yeah, if you want, not you, Jeremy, because you probably saw it, but if you are listening to this, watching this, we did have on 2 former OCM employees that started their own consulting firm last year called Platform Cannabis Advisors, which had a very different take than most people about New York. They were not poo-pooing it. They were saying this is sort of how it was designed to roll out. Slower, maybe, but actually for a stronger, healthier, more vibrant, diverse industry, which we will see in New York over time. But it was an interesting conversation. I would encourage folks to check that out. And the last sort of thematic thing I want to talk to you about is this brewing debate around hemp-derived Delta-8 and sort of cannabis, normal cannabis. The Illinois Cannabis Business Association is calling on the state to crack down on hemp-derived THC, known as industry as Delta-8. They've been joined by state lawmakers who supported banning Delta-8. It sets up, as you mentioned, an interesting fight between traditional licensed cannabis retailers and mostly illicit sellers who are taking advantage of the market. This is also playing out in DC. I think it's really pitting sort of hemp growers and the cannabis industry, which seem on its face should be on the same side, but in this case, they're quite different. Because one operating with very few regulations, one operating with like the strictest of strict. Do you think this is something we're going to see more and more of and come to a head, especially in legal markets? I would say like Minnesota, which has been really, it's been booming.
Yeah, no, I totally do. And I think what's most interesting to me about this is that the industry is bifurcating a little bit, right? I think hemp sellers, they're aware that they're taking advantage of a loophole in the Farm Bill, which sort of allows them, I'll say in scare quotes, allows them to sell Delta 8, which has basically the same pharmacological effects as THC, but it's synthesized. It's not regular THC. That lets them sell in places like Texas, which obviously any sort of regulated cannabis company can't even cross state lines, let alone sell cannabis in Texas, right? So I think that's point one. That's really interesting. We're going to see a lot more of that. Point number two is that there are companies that are sort of playing on both sides of the fence. And so I'm watching them very closely to see what legislation they're going to go for, right? The renegotiation of the Farm Bill seems to have been punted for another year or so. So, whether that loophole that we talked about in the newsletter is still going to exist. But it's going to be interesting to see what these companies do, right? Like, obviously, regulated cannabis companies would like to sell what is in effect the same product with a lot less regulations and a lot larger of a market. That makes a lot of sense. At the same time, they're working with lawmakers in states weighing cannabis legalization, trying to do a good job to write regulations that make sense, both for business and for consumers. And so it's a really interesting debate. Personally, I like to stay away from Delta 8 products. I would encourage our readers to do so. At the same time, if you find yourself in Houston, they work in a pinch. So I'll say that. Yeah.
Fair enough. Don't tell the mayor of Houston that, I guess.
Yeah.
No, it is interesting. And Jeremy, one more thing as we go into sort of the 420 sort of big sales days for sure. Anything, your inbox must be getting super full. I mean, you posted some advice yesterday, like your inbox is full, so it's not going to get the full attention. Yeah. But do you have any special plans for 420? I think it was maybe the New York Post posted like 5-10 things to do on 420. But like, do you sense things in New York are like exciting, celebratory, even though the industry is sort of slow moving? But like, are you sensing things like more exciting this year than last?
Yeah. Look, I mean, 420 for me, I think from working in this industry, this is the most boring answer possible. It's become more of a work obligation than like the awesome thing I thought it was when I was 18 years old, right? But no, there's tons of events. Like the legal dispensaries are putting on great events. I'm going to pop around to some parties. There was a concert on Friday night. That's a Method Man concert where he's doing a nug drop. So I'm going to at midnight on Saturday 420. So I'm going to go to that with a couple of my friends. And so it's going to be really fun. At the same time, I think it's crazy to me. In 2008, I think 420 was like this cool thing that only a few people knew about. And now, we have Pizza, which, as anyone in Toronto is familiar with, it's a giant pizza corporation that is doing 420 tie-in. So, a little whiplash for me, I would say, on 420. But nonetheless, it is exciting. It's fun. And it's a great opportunity for the industry to hopefully celebrate some small wins.
Yeah, and I know there's lots going on in DC too, not only on the sort of celebratory and party front, but I know the industry is descending on DC this week to lobby, obviously, safer banking, talk about rescheduling, talk about the industry, represent the jobs that have represented the industry. And we had the Vanks report, over 440,000 jobs directly related to the cannabis industry. So it is a major industry heading to DC to talk about. We were joking about 420, but it is an important sort of milestone every time a state goes live. There are sort of measurable things happening. And I think it is interesting to talk about. But I also want to thank you for making time this morning, and certainly for a stellar newsletter today. If you haven't read it, I can't believe people haven't read it, but go to it. We'll post it as well as this video goes live as well. Great. Have a good 420. Enjoy the nug drop.
I will, Jay. I'll send you a picture. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you all for joining here today. That's it for Cultivated Live. We encourage you to subscribe to our daily newsletter at cultivated.news, as it says on my hat and Jeremy's shirt. Follow us on LinkedIn. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. Tomorrow, we're going to have Krista Raymer from Vertrana, the foremost cannabis retail consultancy, at 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on LinkedIn and YouTube. We're going to be talking about loyalty and segmentation. That is super important. It's like next level thinking for cannabis retailers. So be sure to tune in if you are one of those. But even if you're not, find out how things are working on the retail level. And during this important week, buy cannabis at your local dispensary. That includes you, Jeremy.
I will. Yeah. At my local dispensary.
There you go.